Mother Knows Death presents External Exams with Nicole and Angemi.
Hi everyone, welcome to Mother Knows Death. On this week's external exam, we will be speaking with Dr. Jason Byrd. Dr. Byrd is a professor and associate director of the William R. Maples Center for Forensic Medicine at the University of Florida's College of Medicine, and he is also a board-certified forensic entomologist. Hi, Dr. Byrd. Welcome to Mother Knows Death.
Hi, thanks for having me on.
Thanks so much for being here. Before we get started, can you tell us exactly what an entomologist is for our listeners who have no idea what you do for a living?
Well, an entomologist is a scientist who studies insects, and an insect is, an organism with three pairs of legs, 6 total, 3 body segments, exoskeleton, of course, some compound eyes, and a pair of antennae. And forensic entomologists are entomologists who focus on insects of forensic importance, particular species that are in the carrion community. And the other thing that we really specialize in is taking this very complex ecology of decomposers in the environment and then being able to, explain it to law enforcement in a way that they can understand how to apply it for casework, apply it to casework to determine things such as postmortem interval estimations, movement of bodies after death, where the body may have came from geographically, and then postmortem movement of remains, attempts to conceal, postmortem handling, freezing of remains. All of that will tend to change the insect fauna. And then finally, we have to go into a courtroom and explain all of that to a trier of fact, be that just a judge in a judge-based trial or a jury. And the courtroom is not the classroom. Sometimes a painful lesson. So trying to explain all of that to a jury in a way that they can not only believe you as a scientist, but more importantly, believe that entomology as a science can add some credibility to the case and making it not overly complicated for the jury. So if you can tie all of that together, then forensic entomology may be for you.
It's really interesting because I have little kids, and most kids are scared of bugs. They freak out if there's a fly near them or a bee near them. And when you were a kid, were you interested in bugs? Like, how did you get interested in this?
Well, I grew up on a very large farm. So agriculture, certainly was very familiar to me. And being on a farm, you're not too far away from insects, right? I mean, you have to worry about insect control. You see insects all the time. So I always thought that they were very interesting, particularly social insects and their seemingly ability to communicate and have, hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands of individuals all somehow work together to accomplish some common goal for the overall organism, which is the colony. So, I was always pretty impressed with that. And the only other thing that I really had an interest in, other than the insects, is forensic science. And I'm not sure why. Didn't have any forensic scientists in the family. Just something that appealed to me. So I was able to merge those two childhood interests into a career in forensic entomology.
So when you were younger and you didn't have anyone in your family that did forensics, and the internet was not what it is now, obviously, when you were younger, how did you even know about it?
Well, magazine subscriptions, back then there was the Smithsonian magazine was popular, National Geographic. There was a weekly science magazine. It was Science Digest. All that was published, of course. I had some subscriptions to those. And then, of course, the library, going to the library, public libraries in the area and going into the science section and just browsing books. And not a lot of people appreciate it anymore, but, encyclopedia sets were a thing. So you could look up stuff in volumes of encyclopedias. It may have been very old at that point in time, but encyclopedias were a wealth of information.
So when you got older and went to high school, did you know exactly what you wanted to go to college for, and what did you go to college for at first?
Well, I always maintained the interest in entomology and forensic science, as a kid, all throughout high school. So graduating high school, time to determine what to do. Um, I really wanted to go to college to do forensics, specifically crime scene investigation. I wanted to be a crime scene investigator. Didn't want to sit in the lab, didn't want to do chemistry or toxicology. And crime scene was something which different each day, outside, a little bit of outside work, a little bit of inside work. So that was really my goal, was to do crime scene. And even at the time, really to get on with the state of Florida, with the state crime lab system, you needed a 4-year degree in natural science or chemistry or physics, biology. So I really set out to just get a 4-year degree so I could check that box and then apply for some crime scene jobs.
And when you started college, did you really know that there was a specialty for forensic, that you can combine forensics and your love of insects?
So yes, I had the idea. I went, there were several colleges that I was looking at, all in Florida. I'm a Florida native. And the University of Florida is the land grant college, and, had the largest agricultural programs and a very large department of entomology as well. So I figured, well, if I'm going to go to college, it's either going to be biology, or something in one of the ag colleges, and UF has, the entomology department. So I set up an appointment and went in to talk to the undergraduate coordinator. And of course, they have to go through the routine checklist. Well, why do you want this degree? And I said, well, I would like this degree because it essentially puts the, 4-year degree checkbox on applications, and I can do forensic science work. And the graduate coordinator said, well, had you ever been interested in forensic entomology? And I said, well, yeah, but, there are no programs in Florida in it. At that time, there's only 3 in the United States that had programs that, I knew about that were accepting students. And turns out that the day that I was in their office, the local newspaper had a front page article on the university's medical and veterinary entomologist. And it wasn't focusing on his medical and veterinary work. It was focusing on his work as a forensic entomologist. So they slid the paper over. It was front page. So I read the headlines and read the first couple paragraphs. And I said, yeah, that sounds like something that would certainly fit my bill. And they said, well, would you like to go talk to him? He's in his office. I said, sure. So his office was really across the hall. Went in, talked to him about my interest in forensic entomology. And then by the time I left that day, I had a job in his lab. I worked, hourly as a student employee, and completed my undergraduate degree with him in the lab. So everything came together because of a newspaper article that just happened to be the day I was in the undergraduate coordinator's office.
Oh my God, that's such fate, right? So what a cool story. So
yeah, I still have the paper.
Oh, do you? That's really cool. Yeah, you should. I mean, that's like what started your story. I love hearing things like this because a similar thing happened to me too, how just the whole thing kind of started falling in my lap day to day, just based upon all these people I were meeting at school and stuff. And of course, there was no internet at the time to be able to even know that some of these things were even a possibility. So it's really cool that that's how you got your start. So it's also cool to tell people that you originally started school just to get a bachelor's degree, because the same thing happened with me. First I didn't even think I would be a college person, and then I forced myself, okay, I'll just get an associate's degree, and then I kept going and going. I never expected that I would in a million years go to grad school. So you're a doctor now. What do you have, an MD, PhD? What did you go to school for after your 4-year degree?
Yeah, so I completed a bachelor's degree, 4-year degree in entomology, and the medical and veterinary entomologist had some very large grants on insect attractancy and developing repellents for industry. And with that grant, he was able to provide me with employment, and then which gave me access to the lab so I could do my own research. So I finished my master's in the same lab in entomology. Got an a graduate minor in criminology and law at the time. I was the first person in U.S. history to cross over between entomology and criminology and law. And I completed that master's degree. And during my master's degree, I wrote a grant proposal for funding a PhD in forensic entomology. And then that grant was awarded. So then I shifted my focus from my work from medical entomology and insect repellents and attractants over to just purely forensic science.
I love that. So you have such a great story. I love this. So after you finished your PhD, you became a board certified forensic entomologist. Did you have to do a certain amount of a certain training in order to be eligible to take that board examination? And if so, where did you do that training?
Yeah, well, I mean, all of that. So there's a written exam now, a practical exam, and then your cases are reviewed. So your casework that you have done. Fortunately for me, back then, I was board certified forensic entomologist number 9. But there were not many. Even without a board certification, you could still get casework, because law enforcement agencies just needed the help. So it's a multiple pronged approach where colleagues peer review your cases to make sure that your analysis and your conclusions are correct. There is a written exam, which is technical in nature, and then there's a practical exam, which includes insect identification and doing some postmortem interval estimations and report writing on that.
Can you explain to us, when you walk into work, I guess there's all different types of things forensic entomologists can do, but when I'm a PA, I go to work and if I'm working in surgical pathology, the specimens come down and I dissect them and describe them and cut them up, look for what caused the disease. When you go to work, what do you do? What's the environment you look like? Is it a lab? Do you have cases that are just sitting on your desk? Are you working on cases for multiple months? How does that go?
Yeah. So for the entomology thing, I mean, every day for me, I wear a slightly different hat. But for the entomology, law enforcement may drive a case up, or they may collect and send it in. So we receive the case, we go through it, we log it into our laboratory management system, which helps us track evidence. Then I kind of triage the case. I open everything up and look at it. Some of the collected insects will be alive, so they need care. So we may have to set them up in environmental chambers or cages, give them some feed, water, or they may be preserved. And even if they are preserved, they may not be preserved properly. These insects can still decompose in a preservative if they're not fixed first. So I make sure that everything is properly preserved, that the live insects are taken care of. And if there are live insects, we just sit and wait for those insects to complete their life cycles. We document when the insects change their life stages. We document when the adults emerge. And then the insects have to be identified. So we have to identify them to species if possible, if not to possible, at least to the genus. So I will try to do a live microscopy identification just using morphology. And, if that does not work, then I have a genetics lab. So I hand it over to the geneticist to be able to do some genetic identification of the species. That usually gets it down to species for me. And once I know the species, then I can gather the weather information. You have to go back, weeks or months to determine what the temperature may have been at the scene at the time. And then compare with laboratory data, whether it's my own data that I've generated or other scientists' data. And then that comes up with an estimate of, how old those insects are. And then once you know that bit of information, then that would be the approximate time of colonization, we call it, when the eggs or larvae are deposited on the body. And then once I have all that information, I write it up in a report and then send it off to law enforcement. And they just incorporate that as the supplementary information in their investigations.
That's so cool. Are there ever times that that they call you to go on crime scenes?
Yes. It's difficult due to my schedule and its budget, right? I mean, they can't have people sitting around at the crime scene just waiting on, me to show up. So I spent a lot of my time training crime scene investigators how to make collections. If they're properly equipped and properly trained, they can make certainly a reasonable collection at the scene. It's procedural at that point. And then they send it to me, and then, the expertise that I have is getting the identifications made and determining age. But the longest time I've had a law enforcement agency hold a scene essentially was 3 days. Just took me that long to get there because it was out of the country. But they were pretty insistent that, I get there and I do the collections because it was a large case for them. If I can get there, then I will. If not, hopefully they've been in one of my classes before and can make the collections and just drive it up to the lab, which probably happens more frequently than anything else.
That must be fun for you to go to different countries and see insects that you don't typically see every day in this country. Is that pretty exciting for you?
Yeah, it is. You see different species, but you also have to be somewhat cautious because there may not be as much developmental information on some of these species as we would expect. And just because it is a species that I may be familiar with, we may have the species here, they may have it somewhere else, does not mean that there's not some genetic drift, which has resulted in some different developmental times and different behavior. So just because it's the same species doesn't mean that it's doing the same thing.
I know that some insects can cause some serious pathology if you get bit by one. Have you ever worked with a species that you would consider to be dangerous?
We get, being in the College of Medicine, of course, we get asked to sometimes help out with some hospital cases. So we have a number of cases where, people have gone into shock from being bitten or stung by insects. And there's an attempt to try to identify the insect species that is responsible for the death. So through the hospital system, that's not too terribly uncommon.
That's really interesting. Do you have a specific species that you could think of that people, obviously in Florida, there's going to be more insects that are common to bite people and cause serious injuries, but do you have an example of one?
Oh, well, for us, there's always a threat of the Africanized bee being out there. But for us, one of the common things that are the yellow jacket nests. They nest underground and can make very large caverns, and not unusual for someone to actually fall in a nest. I guess it's been quite common for farmers, land clearers, people operating tractors and bush hogs to the weight of the tractor collapses in a nest, and then due to the depth of the nest, the tractor becomes stuck, and then the tractor or equipment operator becomes overwhelmed with all of the stinging insects. And even though you may not have a particular sensitivity, you can't survive that many insect stings.
When you get them, you said that sometimes when you get them to the lab, they're alive. Are there special precautions you need to take when you're handling those?
No, not really. The insects that we deal with, for the most part, in forensics are, non-biting insects. Most of the adult flies have spongy mouth parts, and not typically a threat and not usually invasive. Although we did have a case recently of an imported species that isn't supposed to be here, the primary screwworm. So you do have some instances where you may have to take some additional steps for biological control. Because we get cases in from numerous locations, and the people collecting them, of course, aren't expert entomologists. They don't know what they are, so they may accidentally send in some species that may be a biological control problem. So we just have to make sure that our lab is a BL2 certified, and make sure that you can contain the insects that come in.
My only experience with insects really working in pathology has been getting maggots that are on legs with gangrene. And when I was at the medical examiner's office doing autopsies with lots of maggots, lots and lots. And this is just my thing, I guess, but after I go home, even though I know that I'm clean and it's all done, I just have this crazy, creepy, crawly feeling in my skin and I have to take a shower right away. I just have this fear that one jumped on me somehow or got in my hair. Do you, I guess you never have that feeling happen to you working in this field, but have you ever had anything like that happen that you're scared you brought home something from work?
Oh, well, actually, we do a lot of civil cases as well. It's not all criminal. So cases of bed bugs, being in a hotel, you have to go to the property and inspect. So, you're always worried about, did I bring some bed bugs home with me? Crime scenes are not always clean. Some of them have massive roach infestations. And, you may be in Tyvek, but you still have roaches crawling all over your Tyvek and all over, the equipment that's at the scene. So, roaches still give me the heebie-jeebies. Maggots and flies don't bother me too much, but don't like roaches. Not a big fan.
Yeah, I used to work at a hospital in the city of Philadelphia, and we had such a bad roach problem, and especially the morgue is in the basement, and they used to come up out of the drain, but they would be in the light fixtures, like the fluorescent lights you would see in the hospital, and they just were all over the place all the time. And one of the secretaries was working in an office on the second floor, and one fell from the ceiling out of one of those lights onto her jacket. It was like this huge scene. I don't know what it is about them. They're so gross, but I live in New Jersey, which is 20 minutes away from Philadelphia in the burbs. And I never saw a bug like that until I started working in the city. And I can't imagine just like having one of those things in my house. It would freak me out so bad. All right, so let's get on to, you're an educator, you're a professor and associate director of the William R. Maple Center for Forensic Medicine at the University of Florida's College of Medicine. So I have a couple questions about that because I used to work with pathology residents, and when they decided that they wanted to go into forensics, they would do their residency in pathology, and then they would go get a fellowship in forensics. So most of them, they either went to the Philly Medical Examiner's office, some of them went to New York or Miami, and they would go there for a year or two to do a fellowship to become eligible to take the board exam to become a board certified forensic pathologist. Do you teach medical students like that in your program, or do you have programs for other levels of education like crime scene techs, crime scene investigators, things like that?
Well, we try to cover all of that and plus. So, we are in the College of Medicine. So, our department, of course, has anatomical and clinical pathologists that, go other places and do the residencies you're talking about. We do have residents come here. We do go down and give lectures to Miami and their residents. It's one of the things that we do quarterly. I've been doing that for a number of years. But, in our veterinary program, we also have veterinary pathologists that we teach. We're starting a residency program for those as well, for the animals. But, we also teach non-MD bound people. So we specialize in training medical legal death investigators in crime scene techniques and some certain aspects of forensic medicine and forensic pathology. So we focus on those who want to be medical legal death investigators as well. And, a lot of our students are interested in forensics as an undergraduate, and because it's, essentially a STEM approved curriculum, they go to many places. We have them go to vet school, on to med school, of course, is the normal thing. They'll go on to psychiatry law programs. So our students really go everywhere once they finish their master's, if they don't go straight into employment.
You have the most impressive resume I ever saw, by the way. After I read all the things that you do, I'm like, wow, I'm such a loser. Anyway, but you're involved with the educational program. You're the actual administrator for the University of Florida's Vet Science Forensic Program. And I got to thinking about that a lot recently in the past month, because I found a case of a dog that was shot to death along with his owner, and how they used the animal in order to collect bullets from him and do a forensic analysis. And that really got me thinking, because I've never really thought about that an animal would get a forensic autopsy too. And I started looking into it. And last week I actually interviewed a veterinarian pathologist who also does forensics as well. She does both medical and forensic or necropsies on these animals. Is that what you teach them, how to collect evidence and how to perform a necropsy on these animals? Because I'm sure it's done a little bit differently than you would do to look for a tumor or something like that.
Well, I mean, the process is very much the same. I mean, it's for a legal case, right? You're going to go to court. So you want to make sure that you're not just doing a medical exam, you're doing a forensic documentation. So yeah, we have our boarded veterinary pathologist. We'll do the necropsies. The problem with the veterinary forensics in general is you never know what species is going to happen, right? So with our forensic medicine program, that focuses on people. You're training medical legal death investigators. They're going to be doing human crime. In our vet and wildlife program, it could be companion animals, farm animals, any wildlife species. We have a huge program of marine mammals now, and trauma that is being inflicted to marine mammals, and trying to figure out, who is actually doing that, what types of weapons are they using. It becomes a very different application when you're dealing with animals, but that forensic exam and the level of documentation that you want to perform is much the same, whether it be an animal or a human.
Yeah, that was something that I was talking to her about, how really knowledgeable a vet has to be, because with humans, you're just dealing with one species. Well, I guess it's the same with your job too. And when you're working with animals or insects, you just have to know so many more things about anatomy and the different diseases they can get and everything. It's all just very interesting to me. There was a show. Oh, go ahead.
No, I mean, the harsh reality of that is you may not know as much about one species. Like we as entomologists may not have as much developmental information about a particular fly species. So we may not be able to provide the level of detail in one case that we did on we had performed on another case. So the same thing in the veterinary forensic world. You just may not have enough data on the animal to give law enforcement what they want.
When you take these samples from animals, I know what happens with humans, that they go for trace evidence and they go for toxicology and just the medical examiner look at the microscopy. What would you send those specimens to the same labs, or are there specific vet-specific forensic labs?
Yeah, we send them to different laboratories. So the histology goes to different labs. The toxicology will go to a different lab. So yeah, your laboratory support, for the most part, between humans and animals is somewhat divided. Like our vet pathologist doesn't send the histo and toxicology out to the same labs that our medical examiner's office does here in town. It's a very different support system.
So you are also an administrator of the Wildlife Forensic Science Laboratory for the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservatory Commission. And it made me think about this episode I saw years ago on this show called Autopsy, which was it was on HBO. It was one of the original forensic shows with Dr. Byrd. And I thought this was a really cool case. It was about this famous elk that lived in Yellowstone National Park named Charger. And in the episode, they were saying that someone came and a poacher killed the elk. And throughout the investigation on this episode, they were showing it was really cool. I mean, it was a sad story, but it was cool how they were able to figure out who killed this elk and catch them. And here there was an award given, I believe, to the taxidermist that the person brought this elk to. Is that something working for a commission like this? Are they the kind of cases that you guys work on?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Florida Fish and Wildlife Commission. So our wildlife lab is somewhat split. We have a wildlife forensic laboratory who will take in cases from anywhere. And then in addition to that, we have the wildlife lab that supports the Florida Fish and Wildlife Commission. And that lab supports approximately 800 law enforcement officers around the state of Florida. And we will help them with a forensic analysis on any case they have. Sometimes it is identification of the animal species. If they happen to see some, meat that has been field dressed or processed, the sex of that species, whether it's a male or female, determine whether it's taken out of season or not. So it's usually species determination and sex determination. A lot of time with illegal take, it may be a size determination of the animal. A lot of that may be a photograph. People like to post everything on social media. So even if you're doing a crime, then they take a picture of the animal that they have poached and put it on social media, particularly with fish. Everybody likes to hold up the trophy fish, right, for the picture. So a lot of it may be doing some photogrammetry to determine what size that fish may be, because there may be limits on size. It may be too small, maybe too big. So a lot of it is just illegal take analysis and trying to decide whether that is applicable with the law or not. And that's where that stops. And, other efforts like our vet forensic scientists do and our the other part of our wildlife forensic lab, where gets into maybe mistreatment of animals and animal cruelty and how long did the animal suffer and all of that, starvation cases. Those are all have to be split out in our laboratory because we have, different experts to be able to handle the different cases depending on what you're trying to prove or what species you're dealing with wildlife.
That's interesting. I never really thought of how much more complex that all gets with social media and things like that, because how do you even stay on top of that? Or there has to be a whole entire unit dedicated to just taking care of that type of stuff.
Yeah, they do. They have an entire internet crimes unit, the investigators. So we just provide them support as needed. But yeah, they're doing traditional law enforcement investigations, and we're just a small part of that overall investigation for the agency.
This episode is brought to you by my book, Nicole Angemi's Anatomy. Do you have my book yet? If not, you better get it because it's really awesome. It is an A through Z journey of the human body and everything that could go wrong with it. Get it now at thedoramater.com/book. Now we're going to talk about something else that you do on your list of millions things that you do. This is really cool. So you serve as a medico-legal death investigator with the National Disaster Medical System Disaster Mortuary Operational Response Team, or DMORT, Region 4, and serve as a commander for the Florida Emergency Mortuary Operations Response System. That's a mouthful. Can you explain to us what these organizations do and give us an example of any kind of deployments that you've been on?
Sure. So the Disaster Mortuary Operational Response System is the federal mass fatality teams, essentially. They are all organized under the National Disaster Medical System. And historically, there's been 10 regional teams. And those teams can be deployed anywhere where the United States government needs mass fatality assistance. And FEMORS, which is the Florida Emergency Operations Response System, is Florida's state mass fatality team, of which I'm the director and commander. The two are not related. One is the state team and one is the federal team. On the federal team, I have been lucky enough to serve as a medical legal death investigator for many years. And that team has deployed to Hurricane Katrina, the Haiti earthquake, and they send assessment teams out all the time. They responded to the wildfires in Hawaii, and then the assessment teams determine whether a full response is needed, and if a full response isn't needed, then exactly what experts may be needed or what equipment may be needed. But that is all operated essentially with the Department of Health and Human Services with our federal government.
My husband is part of the New Jersey Task Force 1. It sounds like it's a similar type of thing. He gets deployed on things. He's been to a couple of the hurricanes in Florida, actually. Mm-hmm. And of course, he was there a couple years ago. He was deployed to the Surfside condo collapse for a couple weeks. And when he got home, obviously, I had a million questions for him because he was there retrieving bodies, unfortunately. And I had so many questions like, well, what did you do next? Like, who was there taking care of it? And he's just like, Cole, I don't know. There was a refrigerator there. We brought the body. That's the end of it for me. So is that something that one of those teams that you work for would do in a case like that, where there's going to be multiple people that didn't survive an accident? You would actually set up kind of a morgue on site?
It depends. We did the Surfside collapse. We assisted the medical examiner's office and Miami-Dade PD. So these teams do a number of things. They may help with the family assistance aspect of it, which we typically call, our microcosm is the victim information center. We need to collect antemortem data, right? You need a missing persons list, essentially. And then from that list, you start vetting it down to who the potential victims may be. And then you have to do interviews, right? Who's missing, what's their hair color, eye color, natural nails, artificial nails, the whole thing that makes that person a person, surgical scars, so on and so forth. Get a DNA sample. Maybe that DNA sample's from siblings or a biological parent, and that builds up your antemortem database. And then your postmortem database are the identifiers that come in from the forensic examination of the remains. We may be able to do that in an existing medical examiner's office, which is what happened with the Surfside collapse. The medical examiner's office in Miami has a tremendous capacity. That office wasn't impacted at all, so they're still able to use their facility. We just provided people and additional expertise. But for like Hurricane Katrina and Hurricane Michael and Hurricane Ian, where the medical examiner's offices themselves are impacted, we have the ability to bring in basically a mobile morgue. That has all the cooling capacity, all of the forensic stations, all the equipment. And we basically set up a portable medical examiner's office for the duration of the response until that medical examiner's office gets back to capacity and is operational. So both the National Disaster Medical System has that capability and Florida has that capability. Our equipment is very similar. The equipment often comes from the same vendors. It is packed the same. It's often numbered the same. And we do that on purpose because if we need the federal teams as backup, we don't want to have to train those individuals on our system. We want our system to be very familiar to them so they can come in, have almost zero just-in-time training. They walk in that environment and they should feel very at home because everything looks the same to them. The equipment's in the same spot. And they can literally come in and just start to work. And that was very important to Florida's disaster preparedness. We are a team of about 250 people. And, at times the DMORT teams are around 1,200. So they have much more reserve capacity than we do. So trying to interface those two systems as seamlessly as possible was very important to us.
That's interesting. I never really thought that you would have to talk to family members and get that kind of information for them. Is that hard for you to have those conversations with people?
It is very difficult. They're in their maximum time of grief. So we have a special team who trains on being able to do these interviews. And that's really all they do. And then we make sure that the people who are conducting the family interviews and being with the families, the relatives and friends are really never in the morgue capacity. We make sure that those two worlds are separate. So we have a distinct victim information team that handles all the antemortem stuff, and then a forensic science team that handles all of the postmortem. And then we have essentially a disaster site recovery team who was there at Surfside as well. We are not technically trained to get on rubble piles. So that is where a lot of these other very specialized teams come in to be able to assist with that. But once they come off the rubble pile and are in a safe environment, and then we take over, and then our specialty is conducting the forensic identifications to help that medical examiner of jurisdiction or coroner of jurisdiction, depending on what state you're in, make that confirmatory identification.
Well, I'm going to CrimeCon, which we will talk about you going there as well. My husband's going with me, so I'm sure he's going to want to talk to you about this because it was a lot for him to be there. That was physically, mentally. It was very hot. They were doing a lot of hard work in the sun and just very emotionally taxing. It just was. But he would be interested in speaking with you, I'm sure, because I did ask him last night. Do do you by chance meet this guy when you were there? But he doesn't, he doesn't remember.
A
He
lot
met
of people were
some
there.
people. Yeah, exactly. But so let's talk about CrimeCon. I have your book, Forensic Entomology, behind me, and I'm going to bring it with me so you could sign it when when I meet you
Okay.
in person. But
Deal.
so you're going to CrimeCon. What are you going to be doing at CrimeCon? Are you presenting a lecture?
Yeah, for CrimeCon, we often will present a lecture on a particular forensic topic or case. And then, like what we did with the last CrimeCon is set up the mock crime scenes for the teams to be able to go through. We try to make it a competitive environment as to who solves the whodunit aspect of that and set up some mystery cases. So our initial plan is to really go and kind of do what we have done before, where we set up a mock crime scene, see which teams can collect the most evidence, and really get the whodunit aspect of it correctly. And then we're planning on some of our faculty at least giving 2 lectures on a forensic specialization.
That's awesome. I can't wait to sit in on those. You're doing so many things. Are you? I mean, you're doing CrimeCon. You're just in charge of all these really great things that are helping so many people every day. Are you working on any other kind of projects or events that you have coming up?
Well, I mean, we do a lot of grant work and research. It's not just me; it's the entire team here at the University of Florida. Lots of people involved, and probably one of our most rewarding things right now is trying to work with marine mammals, trying to be able to get information on their decompositional times. A lot of the postmortem artifacts that marine scientists are seeing on these animals, we're trying to determine if they're naturally occurring because of the organism, the fish or the mammal, coming into contact with something in its environment, either before death or after death, or whether it's something that's human induced that is causing these what appears to be obvious trauma. A lot of them are shot pretty good, but they have penetrating injuries and some blunt force trauma that could be ship strike, but it's so isolated on some of them it looks like maybe they're being clubbed with some sort of an instrument. So just trying to give some forensic expertise and some data to the the marine mammal community while they try to conserve these species and solve what could be crimes against federally protected species. It is very rewarding to us.
That's interesting. I think in New Jersey, we kind of have something like that going on because all of these marine animals keep washing up. I think it seems that there's a little bit more than usual. And there's all this talk of, did all of these wind things that they just put up, or is it causing, I don't know much about it, but I've been hearing this back and forth of it may be causing a problem for the animals. And then they're trying to just investigate to see if the timing is just coincidental or if it actually is. Is that something like that you would work on as well?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we have single stranding events all the time, so very important to determine, the cause. But then you have mass strandings. So it's pathology. You have to understand what is natural before you can start to understand the unnatural. So we have to rule out disease processes, environmental causes, maybe algae blooms. Red tide happens down here in Florida, quite a bit. So, is it environmental and natural, or environmental and is becoming more pronounced because, our environment is changing, or rather, this is something that's actually human induced? Pretty easy to see if, the stranding networks out there, if they see a marine mammal that's entangled in a net or anything like that, and they monitor that animal, they try to assist the animal. But, they may find an animal with scars. And is that from a prior entanglement? Is it from encounter with another marine organism? Sharks attack dolphins quite a bit and leave some very interesting scars on these dolphins. Or is it indeed human induced with some of these penetrating injuries that we see? So we're trying to figure that out and then give some reliable scientific information to our colleagues in the marine mammal world and marine biology, and maybe they can help answer these questions for everybody.
Do you guys have your team? Do you have a website, or do you do any social media with any of the subjects that you talked about today?
Yeah, we do. You can go to the University of Florida homepage and search for the Maples Center. So it's maples-center.ufl.edu. And that has all of our classes, our training, and links to our social media pages so you can see what we're doing.
That's awesome. And that's great for people. I always want to introduce people to all of these different professions because they're just so cool. And I think I hear a lot of younger people, some of my friends' kids that are in their 20s that go to school and they're just getting a degree in biology and then they graduate and they can't do anything with it. So I want them to know there's all these cool opportunities that they can do with that degree, maybe with additional training.
I think a degree in the forensic sciences it's an excellent path for students. So, well, to me, it's interesting. But if you're interested in anything, there's a forensic application to it. I mean, forensic accounting, forensic meteorology, there's forensic engineering. It just encompasses so many areas of study. And I think it's important to let these students know that, I mean, you can find employment in it. It's not just a pathologist standing at an autopsy table. There is, a small army of forensic scientists out there with, unimaginable specializations that they have acquired in techniques. And it's very employable. And we certainly need, more students coming into it because we have to replace ourselves, So it's one of my activities and my jobs to talk to student groups and try to get them interested in forensic science. We have lots of students. We have over 1,000 students in our programs right now. So it's been very successful to us. And the flip side of that coin is forensic science, at least in the universities I've been involved with and some of the data I've seen, for first-year incoming students has a fairly high attrition rate. You lose a lot of first-year students because I think the CSI effect hits, right? They watch too much TV and true crime. And it is very, very interesting, but there's a lot of science behind it, and you really can't get away from the science and the field work and the data analysis. And one of the most common questions that I get from concerned first-year students is, well, I like the forensics part, but I don't like the science part. So how do I do forensics without science? So, the harsh reality is it's not cut out for everyone because you can't get away from a lot of the sciences. But if you can get through the science aspect, it's a very rewarding career and very employable.
Forensics is science. How do you? I don't even understand. I do know what you mean though, because I didn't specifically go for forensics. I went for pathology, but there was a lot of the chemistry and learning about moles and doing algebra problems and organic chemistry and this and that, things that don't necessarily apply to what I ended up doing for a living, but you have to get through that. But a lot of it does apply. I try to tell my kids that all the time with math, that it stretches your brain and it helps you problem solve. And with forensics especially, you really need to be able to think about things because everything isn't always going to be how it's presented,
Yep. There is a reason why you suffer through the physical chemistries and the organic chemistries and the algebra and calculus. It does have application. It may take you a while to realize it, of course, but there is application for it. But yeah, forensic science, I think, is a highly suggested career for students looking for their place.
Yeah, I think that the CSI shows and stuff, they make everything look so glamorous and that it's very easy to solve something in a half hour. And then you go into a real morgue in the city and just think, okay, that medical examiner isn't some hot chick and this office doesn't have any shiny stainless steel walls. It looks like the 1970s in here. And
yeah, we don't work in the dark either,
Yeah.
Lights. But
it smells really bad.
CSI and all of its editions, Miami, Las Vegas, New York. I mean, there's a lot of negativity around that because a lot of people think that it doesn't portray forensic science accurately, of course, and it can't, right? I mean, it is entertainment, and several people have now done dissertations on the CSI effect, on the unreasonable expectation that sometimes the public has and what we can do. But the flip side of the coin is, it has made the word forensics kind of a household name, right? Lots of people talk about it. Lots of people are interested. But, the show CSI wasn't the first time we had it. I mean, you had Nancy Drew and Sherlock Holmes, and then we had Quincy Medical Examiner television show. each generation has its attachment to that type of work, and it's if you watch old episodes of Quincy, there's a lot of similarities there in how they portray stuff. But yeah, I mean, if you get through that and really get down into what is it, I think it still has interest for a massive amount of people.
I always tell people that with my Instagram, that because so many people want to end up doing what I do as a pathologist assistant. And I say, like, the actual job isn't as exciting as I make it out to be, because I just show you the really cool stuff. But if you just recorded me at work all day dissecting surgical specimens, it might be kind of boring, I mean, there are definitely fun part for me because I'm a science nerd and I just think everything is exciting. But I think it wouldn't be entertaining to the mass public. That's what I think anyway.
I think you're exactly right on that.